I had a crystal ball and I can look, 15, 20 years into the future, maybe 15 years into the future. I have always told people that when you go to the store, when you go shopping, everything that you purchase will be a sustainable purchase because the way things are going now, companies have to perform on sustainability. So we bring that out a decade, 15 years. The companies that aren't doing it today aren't going to be around anymore. So it'll just be this virtuous cycle that gets to basically everything being done behind the scenes. All I have to do as a consumer is just make a choice. Love that. I really think that's a realistic vision of where the future is. Where AI fits into that, if we use it hyper optimistically, is getting us there faster and getting us there in a way that is, again, going to take everybody along on the journey. So that's my hope with AI and sustainability.
Welcome to the AI Grapple podcast. My name is Kate VanderVoort, founder and CEO of the AI Success Lab. Today, I am joined by John Pabon, sustainability author, consultant, speaker, and Australia's only independent greenwashing expert. John has spent over 20 years working across public policy, global consulting, and sustainability strategy, with experience spanning the United Nations, McKinsey, and a decade living and working in China. In this conversation, we tackle one of the biggest and most uncomfortable questions facing AI adoption right now: its environmental and social impact. John helps unpack what's real, what's hype, and what organizations need to be thinking about as AI reshapes business, reporting, and trust. We talk about data centers, energy use, transparency, greenwashing versus green hushing, and why sustainability is no longer just an environmental issue. It's deeply tied to ethics, governance, and how companies communicate honestly. If you're a business leader, marketer, or decision maker trying to navigate AI without damaging trust or values, this is a conversation you'll want to lean into. Hi, John. Welcome to the AI Grapple podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. Really looking forward to the conversation.
I am very much looking forward to this conversation. I get lots of curly questions around this topic, but before we dive into those curly questions, because I'm going to throw them all at you, I would love you to give us a bit of background about who you are, how you've come to be where you are, and maybe a bit about your AI journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm so sure people can realize, in the space of sustainability. I've been in that space now probably 20-ish years, but I come out of a public policy background, so the United Nations, McKinsey, AC Nielsen, and I kind of fell into sustainability accidentally when I moved to China, which was supposed to be a very temporary trip. It ended up being a decade of my life where I really dug into not necessarily the environmental side of sustainability, which obviously is very important and probably the part that most people know about, but more the social and governance side, which we'll absolutely get into in our conversation around AI. And then love brought me to Australia, and happenstance brought me to this conversation with you right now.
Fantastic. What a
Or was it Harrow? I think Harrow brought us together. Help a reporter out sort of thing. Yeah. We're here now.
We're here now. So I'm going to hit you with the big one first and I might just give a bit of context to this, because I've said in quite a few of the podcasts that it's really interesting to me when we're working within companies that often the more mature workers or employees in these companies are actually quite ready to embrace AI and are actually looking at, I've got all my wisdom and my experience and my expertise that I've brought to the table, and now I can use AI to do it more efficiently, more productively, create a bigger impact. And some of the most resistance that we get in companies or workplaces is often from the younger people that are in the workforce, which is a little counterintuitive. But when I dig a little deeper around why they're a bit resistant to AI, the environmental impact is hands down the number one reason that younger people tend to be more reluctant or resistant to AI. So talk to me about your knowledge, experience, and maybe opinions or viewpoints on the environmental impact of AI.
Yes, and I suppose I'll preface all of this by saying that even in the sustainability space, there are people on both sides. of the issue. Some are saying it's Satan incarnate for the environment. Others are saying, no, 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 no. There's so much benefit that we can get from this. I think I'm sitting somewhere in the center of all of that. So hearing it from both sides, but certainly we can't ignore the environmental impact that AI, particularly data centers, are having on the environment as it is. And of course, this is new technology. So the companies running these things, running the data centers, are also trying to, what's the adage? Build the train as it's on, build the track as the train's rolling down it. So there's a lot of unknowns at this time, and even the people that are researching this. So a great study came out, I think it was the University of Riverside, California, last year, looking at how do we quantify the environmental impact of AI. And they tried to do it, and they used sort of the amount of water that's being used. They tried to bring it as small as possible so people can really understand. And I'm going to bring up a document because I don't want to get the numbers wrong, because even with this, it is kind of damning. So you look at sort of the amount of water that's widely used to cool those data centers, and there's numbers being thrown around from 20 gallons per use all the way to, just small amounts of milliliters per use, but it's probably running around 2.5 liters of water per kilowatt hour of energy consumed. So is it terrible? It's not great. It's certainly worse than a Google search. And then if you look at kind of the sort of the Soras of the world, that's using an even larger amount of water to cool the data centers. All of that to say, yes, it's having an outsized impact in terms of what we're used to in the past, but it's being addressed, I think, at a lot of these companies. The unfortunate thing that's going on, though, is Google, as an example. They have their targets that they're trying to meet in terms of emissions, and the AI resurgence or renaissance has blown those out of the water. So now what's happened on the other end of the spectrum is companies like Google, like the big tech companies, are saying, well, maybe we're just not going to tell you about this stuff anymore, which is not the direction we want them going. And we want them being more honest and open and transparent. But AI is kind of backing them into a corner of, we have these goals, but we also have to respond to what everybody's asking for. So it is this very strange time in this race to, let's call it the AI race, to keep up with what everybody else is doing. And that's not great right now in the short term when it comes to environmental impact.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting one because a lot of people are saying, well, AI is going to help us solve some of those problems. Maybe not. We'll see. But I heard a CSIRO researcher speaking the other day about how at the moment data centres here in Australia are taking about 4% of the energy grid compared to about 30% for air conditioners, and that air conditioners are still, heavily on the rise, and that the new technology that's coming out will bring that down to about 2%. So when you look at overall energy usage, we're not talking extremes. No. And then you hear people compare, ChatGPT usage to producing a hamburger.
Right.
The energy consumed for that. And so I think you're right in that we just don't know, and people are measuring in so many different ways.
And I think that's the fear, is there's always a fear of the unknown, right? But certainly for folks that are focused on the environment, they're thinking, okay, well, if this is where it is now, and we're just in the nascent stages of the industry, if you want to call it that, the sector of AI, and it's growing so quickly, and with, as I'm sure we'll get into, a lot of lax regulation, if there's any regulation at all, what does the future hold then? Is it going to become the next agricultural sector, which for anybody who doesn't know is one of the most polluting sectors in the world? So it's that fear of the unknown that we're really having to temper and put a lot of faith in companies that they are going to innovate their way out of this, which, do they? I don't know.
Yes, well, I think that is definitely going to be a time will tell. One of the interesting things I'm keeping an eye on here in Australia is these data centres. One of the big issues that we have here is around data sovereignty, is that in order to be able to keep our data here in Australia, there's only certain platforms really that you can use. But there's a huge interest in Australia around data centres because we have the space, we have
Yes.
the natural resources, and there's some huge deals being inked at the moment with massive data centres here in Australia. And one group in particular, and the name escapes me, two young brothers, I think, who've set it up, which is a very environmental focus about doing the best they can to make them as environmentally sound as possible. So Australia, I think, could really lead the way in some of the innovation there. So again,
absolutely, and those are sort of the things that we want to see happening, right? We want to see people looking critically at what's going on and innovating on top of that to create an environmentally sound, as much as possible, data center, especially in a water stretched region like Australia and probably a lot of the places where these data centers will be set up.
Yeah, and then there's new technology. Again, I don't have all the details, but I think it's liquid cooling, which is not so much just using water, but recycling liquid to cool, and that uses a lot less water
Yes.
overall. But yes, this researcher firmly said, don't expect that you'll find tradespeople for the next 5 to 10 years because
Right.
they will all be building data centers here in Australia. So we'll, we talk about the net effect of job loss potentially because of AI. If you're in the trade sector, you're probably going to do pretty well. So you spend a lot of time helping organisations kind of cut through the noise and focus on what really moves the needle. With AI bringing in all these claims about efficiency and sustainability, how can businesses sort through that? How can they evaluate, I guess, their own sustainability goals as it relates to AI, but also some of that broader hype that is happening around AI at the moment?
Yeah, it's a great question, and that's the exact right place to sort of start when you're looking at anything around a business function plus sustainability. And the thing I always recommend, regardless of what it is, AI or otherwise, is to identify really what's most material for your business, right? So what is actually important to your internal stakeholders and your external stakeholders, to your business strategy? Are you adopting AI just because everybody else is doing it, or is there an actual business need to it? I think that it really comes down to that. It's really as simple as that. Do I actually need to adjust everything that's going on in my business to incorporate this newfangled thing that I don't even know what I'm going to use it for? Or is there a material need to have this in my business? Is it going to help further my business goals and my strategy, or is it going to be an impediment? And I don't think a lot of companies are viewing it that way. I think they're just trying to, as I mentioned before, just grab AI as much as possible, because if they don't, somebody else is going to and beat them to the line.
And so when you're working with companies, though, how do you help them weigh up, I guess, more of that environmental sustainability, social responsibility, governance piece as they're evaluating AI as an option for their business?
Yeah, so it really does come down to, again, that identifying what is most material, and that goes through a lot of conversations with people, because at the end of the day, the work that we do is it's very person to person sort of work, even though it doesn't seem like it sometimes. It's a lot of stakeholder engagement, a lot of conversations to then really narrow down and dilute, okay, what is everybody actually saying? What's the red thread here? And what then can we apply from that to these ideas that we have, whether it's AI or otherwise? And then what does that do to the business? So it's a far more strategic look at sustainability versus the traditional, I suppose, model of passion projects or something that people just want to do because it makes it much more business focused. And I think certainly for sustainability, that then becomes a sustainable business model versus just something that is here today and gone tomorrow.
Hmm. So AI depends on huge amounts of data, and a lot of companies are already starting to talk about responsible AI, but not many are really kind of connecting that to things like responsible sourcing, supplies chains, or labor. So where do you see the biggest risks and blind spots for organizations trying to bring these pieces together?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because when we think of AI today, we're thinking sort of the chat GPTs, the large language models, but AI is not new. We've used AI, especially in supply chain and logistics, for a very long time. It's just a new incarnation now. So what a lot of companies have done successfully with various components of AI is they've used it for traceability. I think grocery stores, Carrefour, the French grocery chain, is a great example where many, many years ago, they started to put QR codes on the back of packages, particularly produce, where you can scan it and identify all the way back to who planted the seed for that particular product. That's a use of AI. Oracle's used AI in their factories, especially across the developing world, for many years to try to see how can they best optimize the use of space to avoid things like people getting hurt and to make it as efficient as possible. That's another use of AI. So large language models, even though they are a lot bigger than the examples I just gave, it's sort of that next iteration and incarnation of AI. And companies now are sort of looking at AI, especially large language models, still through that lens of traceability and figuring out how can we better understand what's happening across our business, particularly when it comes to environmental emissions, which A lot of companies, even though they say they know what's going on, they really don't. So that's sort of that next thing is if we're looking at sort of how a company can really take AI and use it to their best interest, especially a large company, is figuring out where your emissions coming from and how can you better manage those. And if it's not that, how can you better manage and understand just what's happening across your business in general? So I don't think it's a sort of a fear factor kind of thing of the watch outs, because I don't know if we have those yet. We will eventually for sure, but it's more opportunities, I think, right now for a lot of companies if they look at it the right way.
And I know a lot of that sustainability piece, and particularly around reporting and some of the legislation that we have here in Australia, can be really overwhelming or onerous for some businesses too. So I imagine that AI can actually play a really useful role in helping to make what's potentially invisible more visible within a company.
Absolutely. Reporting is hands down, bar none, the biggest headache for sustainability professionals. I half joke, that we've sort of become accountants now because of all the different regulations, not just here in Australia, but certainly coming out of Europe and the US. So AI is a massive opportunity to be able to better understand all of that and to figure out, okay, out of these, I think there's 4,800 different frameworks that exist. Which ones do I actually need to report against? And how in the world am I going to do that if I'm just a sustainability person of one that's working in this department, which is sort of what happens.
Yeah, I imagine there'll be some really interesting, off-the-shelf products that become available in that space utilizing AI.
Yes.
As we start to get those more niche use cases of AI. It popped into my head as you were speaking before about supply chains. One of my favorite stories was sitting next to a speaker on a panel at the UQ Business School. This was almost 2 years ago now, and it was a panel about food and agriculture and supply chain and the use of AI. And she was sharing that they did a pilot in a meat processing factory, and they set up one meat processing arm over this side and one over this side, and this one was monitored by AI and this one wasn't. And at the end of the pilot, they found that the AI managed, I've lost the word, Friday afternoon, conveyor belt process thing. The AI managed one had a 200% productivity gain. And then when they dug deeper and looked at all of the statistics, they realized that the AI was actually watching both.
Oh.
The AI was claiming the productivity from the other processing plant.
That sounds about right.
Yeah,
at this stage of the game, that sounds right.
So you describe yourself as Australia's only independent greenwashing expert. So for those of us that don't know what that means, can you explain that in simple terms? And I guess, what does greenwashing mean in the context of AI?
Yeah, absolutely. So greenwashing is essentially when corporations, but it's other actors as well, they'll wrap themselves in the language of sustainability, good for the planet, good for you. And the reality may not be as altruistic as they're letting on. So at the end of the day, boiled down, it's companies lying to you about their environmental credentials or social credentials. This comes in varying degrees. Sometimes it's on purpose. Sometimes it's accidental. If you look at the big fossil fuel companies, they've been doing it for decades and we sort of know it's being done. Other times it's more nefarious and you can't really suss it out as well. So it's happening from companies primarily, but also governments, NGOs, celebrities love to do it. The billionaires love to do it as well. So it's really trying to gain that social clout through wrapping yourself in the language. Now, when it comes to AI in particular and greenwashing, I think we kind of just touched on one of the main issues with AI and greenwashing is the fabrication of information, I think is a massive issue. And then you can layer on top of that the ethics behind that as well. I think for me, those are the two massive watchouts right now that I'm not sure many people are looking into as deeply as maybe the environmental side is how do we keep AI or how do we make AI an ethical piece of the work that we do? And that falls squarely in the social side of sustainability. So people are, listening to this or watching this and thinking, what does that have to do with environment? It doesn't. It has to do with the other part of sustainability, which then leads to the third part, which is the governance of all of this. So how and who is watching AI? Who's developing this? And what intentions do they have? And that's really hard to parse out. So how then AI is used to present itself as something better than it might be, or used as, somebody saying, okay, well, we have the most environmentally sound large language model. What does that actually mean? So when it comes to greenwashing AI, there are absolutely a lot of watchouts that we should be digging more into just to keep ourselves safe.
I think what's interesting about what you just said is people always talk about human in the loop. And when I'm working in companies, we talk about expert in the loop. Because I can just imagine someone using AI to help with their sustainability principles or measuring or reporting. And if they're not an expert or they don't actually know the frameworks and the formulas and whether what is coming out of AI is actually accurate. There's a real danger there that people can be reporting and making claims that are not accurate, which is why expert in the loop and actually having the human that verifies be knowledgeable enough and have the expertise to decipher that will be really important.
We've seen it here over the past few months. Was it Deloitte got in trouble for making a fabricated report using AI? There was another conservative-leaning NGO that gave false information using AI-generated report, gave it to the Nationals, which then informed Nationals' environmental policy. So it's really important that people know that when you get something from AI, you need to fact check it. It doesn't necessarily mean it's true. And I think there's certainly fewer experts than there are experts at this stage of the game. People just assume, okay, AI's right, but no, not even close.
Yeah,
It's a very imperfect model.
Discernment, I think, is the word of the decade for us, is we need to be discerning as we use this technology.
Absolutely.
So in your book, Sustainability for the Rest of Us, your no BS 5-point plan for saving the planet, can we save the planet and create this AI-powered world that we're barreling into right now? Can the two exist together?
That's an amazing question. I love that. And I suppose I'll preface it by saying that I call myself a pragmatic altruist. So I'm not a greenie hanging off the side of a whaling ship. I'm not a doomist saying we're all screwed. I sit somewhere in the middle of all of that. I approach it very pragmatically, very much dollars and cents, since I work with the private sector primarily. So yes, I'm hopeful that there is a future where we can coexist with AI without ending up in some sort of a Terminator scenario, hopefully. So what that's going to take is really the critical question. Who is going to lead this? How are we going to regulate this? How are we going to upskill and educate everybody so that we do have more experts than non-experts? I think these are the questions that ideally the powers that be should be thinking about. But as I say that, I know that even internet governance right now is sort of stuck in the 1990s. So I don't know if the octogenarians in a lot of parliaments around the world are going to be looking at AI with that critical of a lens. But we'll get there. It's just we're sort of in this strange kind of growing pains period right now, this roller coaster that you mentioned earlier.
And that regulation piece is really interesting because it's not consistent at all globally. And, in Australia, we're sort of hedging our bets and sitting in the middle with voluntary guidelines that they recommend that we adopt when it comes to AI. And then you've got the EU Safety Act, which is much more conservative and focused on safety. And then you've got America barreling headlong on innovation. And then, China's trying to stay at the table so they still get access to computer chips.
Yep.
So the whole geopolitical situation is really interesting, and it will be interesting. I've heard a lot of experts here in Australia, legal experts in particular, speaking about they're surprised that we haven't gone harder here in Australia on the mandatory guidelines. So it will be interesting to see how that unfolds over the coming years.
Absolutely. And sort of the geopolitical part is fascinating because we sort of assumed in the sustainability environmental space maybe a decade ago that future wars would all be fought over resources. When we said that, we thought water. But maybe technology is also one of those resources that needs to be lumped in there, because I wouldn't put it past any country to go to war over AI, which is why we need more stringent regulations and a keener eye on the development of this versus letting basically 3 or 4 people create this stuff without any oversight at all.
Yeah, and we're probably not in the war for AI yet, but the race is certainly on. And, China came out saying that they've introduced AI from kindergarten through to year 12. And a week later, Trump signs the executive order that kindergarten through to university in America, AI is compulsory. And so just this race where everybody's, vying for the best technology, access to and also educating their whole populations around AI is fascinating to watch.
Yeah,
The
I think that.
UAE have made ChatGPT free for all of the
Oh,
paid plan, free for all of their residents in the UAE. So
I
they're
didn't know that. That's
taking,
amazing.
yeah, they're taking a big stake in, we want to make our country AI powered.
It's the education that goes along with that, though, is the question. You empower
Absolutely.
everybody. It's sort of like the internet in the early days, right? We have access to more information in the palm of our hand than a member of the royal family did in the 1800s. And what do we do with it? We watch cat videos. So it's the same sort of thing with AI, except now I think AI is so much more powerful, particularly if we look at it through the lens of spreading misinformation or disinformation or the use of resources. So I think there does need to be not either, both an education and a legal slash regulatory piece that we should be really focused on right now.
Yes, well, it's unfolding slower than
Yes.
a lot of people are expecting. But it took us 16 years here to get a handle on social media, and we've just got this social media ban coming in for under 16-year-olds in a couple of weeks. But we don't have 16 years to wait on making some of those decisions about AI.
No, not with the speed at which it's evolving. Yeah, it is
No.
slow, but it's fast.
Yeah. So there's a real possibility, and this is something I'm really interested in, because there's a real possibility of consumer backlash or pushback around AI. And I can imagine that if you lose your job to AI or you have a negative experience with AI, people are going to be cautious about which brands and which companies. And we've seen a lot of environmental pushback that has shaped some behavior. But as people start to connect with the ethical or environmental concerns, if a company already has strong sustainability commitments, how can they navigate the AI conversation without damaging that trust?
Trust is a great word, and I think that's what it comes down to. And I'll use another very overused marketing word, which is authenticity, which grown, I know. But I think it really does come down to that. I think where we sort of are, where a lot of C-suite thinking is versus bringing audiences, consumers, stakeholders along on that journey and informing them at every step. Companies are now just being very quiet. And we've created a term for this, like we needed another term, but we call it green hushing, which is an offshoot of greenwashing, but it's basically no matter what a company is doing, good or bad, they're just not saying anything at all. That's not great because we want companies doing the right thing to be talking about it to encourage other companies to do the right thing. So now it's really become quite insular. Legal teams are terrified, comms teams are terrified, so nobody's talking about anything at all. So I think that's where things sort of are right now with corporate thinking, particularly around AI and the use of AI. But it should be the opposite direction, where the company that is going to be very open, honest, authentic, transparent are really going to be the ones that lead everybody forward. Because at the end of the day, we all want to be taken along on the journey. Nobody expects a company to be perfect. We just don't want to be lied to. So just tell me what you're doing and tell me, hopefully, why you're doing it. Hopefully, you know that as well. And that's okay. I don't think certainly when it comes to AI and particularly the large language models, nobody is expecting a company to get it right out of the gate either. So there's going to be a lot of grace that's given, but companies, particularly compliance and legal teams, don't see things that way. They see it all as risk, not as opportunity.
Well, one of the things we do with clients when we're helping them to put that governance framework into place is to put out an AI integrity or an AI ethics statement, just like terms of service and privacy statements on websites, that actually lets their customers, their stakeholders know how they're using AI internally, and particularly around customer data, but also what's their approach to this transformation. Are they going to be replacing humans with technology, or
Right.
have they got a real human first approach? And I think we're going to see some massive backlash in some industries as some get it wrong. And for companies that can actually position themselves with a statement that shares publicly how they are using AI, I think they will be able to ride that out a lot more.
Absolutely.
We've got companies like Duolingo where the CEO comes out and says, we are an AI first company and this is our manifesto, and we will not hire another human until a team can prove that the job can't be done by AI, and they replaced half their contractors with AI and doubled the number of language courses. And of course, they lost hundreds and thousands of customers because they just went all in on AI, stuff the people.
Yeah.
And people don't want to see that. So I think, it ties in nicely to what we're talking about, is companies really being transparent about how they're, and also being transparent when they don't know, because
Yeah.
none of us really know where this is going to head, where it's
Exactly
going to end
right.
up.
And when we think about it through the lens of greenwashing, we'll go back to that for a second. It's not greenwashing until you lie, right? If a company comes out and says, yeah, we're bad. Like if a fossil fuel company came out and said, we're destroying the planet, we know it, we're not going to do any, sort of social responsibility work because why? It doesn't make any sense for our business model. Okay, cool. Like, I don't like it, but you're not lying to me, so fine. At least you're open, honest, and transparent. And we need that from the good guys as well.
Absolutely. So tell me, John, do you use a lot of AI yourself? And if you do, what's your favorite platform or your most innovative way of using AI?
I'm going to get pilloried for saying this. No, I do use AI. I'm probably a later adopter because as an author, you sort of have this. It was more a pride thing than anything else, right? And going back to education, until I learned what was possible with AI. So I sort of always assumed, and you get the bad information about what it is and what it does and how, and you see how people are using it in really terrible ways. I mean, just take a little trawl through LinkedIn and you can see just all the slop that's everywhere. So you look at that and you go, oh, I don't want to be involved in that at all. But on the other end of the spectrum, I'm an independent consultant, and AI has been amazing as an independent consultant to give me a sounding board. I don't talk to it like my therapist, of course, but to give me a sounding board or ideas or help me to think of things I would have never thought of otherwise. So that's super beneficial. I don't use it in my writing because that's just probably a bridge too far for me right now. But certainly with my thinking around consulting, I find Claude to be probably the best for me. I think certainly from a ease of language and marketing sort of use, Claude just resonates. ChatGPT is okay, but Claude's the one for me.
There's a
It's
lot.
weird saying it like that, but it is. Claude's the one for me.
Claude's your
Claude's my
bestie.
guy. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot being talked about around left brain and right brain at the moment in our usage of AI, and how, if we really lean into AI doing the left brain tasks, it actually can free up our right brain to do that more creative, those things that make us uniquely human. So,
Which was always the goal, right? I think it got bastardized somewhere, but that was the goal of AI, language models, robotics as well, was to free us up for more creative, human-focused stuff, not to destroy the creative side of our brain, which you look at all the AI slop, and I think it's kind of done that in some ways. It'll be fascinating to see in 50 years what scientists researching our brains are going to find.
Yes, whether we've just rotted into decay or whether we have improved as a species. But I think, a lot of that comes, I talk a lot at the moment about this concept of personal responsibility. A lot of people are trying to blame AI on others and say, oh, it's going to make us dumber and it's going to do this and it's going to do that. And at the end of the day, we are each personally responsible for how we engage with the technology. And you can choose to just outsource everything to AI and then share that slop out on LinkedIn without reading it. And that's going to make you dumber. There is nothing in that process that is going to enhance anybody else's life, and certainly not your own brain. But, when people do learn how to use it responsibly and ethically and correctly, then we get that augmentation or that, real strategic thought partner opportunity. And that's where it can start to make a difference.
Absolutely, and it's until it becomes sentient, which I'm sure it'll happen eventually. It's a tool. It's a tool that we can use, and we command it. So there's the business adage, garbage in, garbage out, and that's sort of what happens. And that's like you said, the fault of the individual. It's personal responsibility, but at the same time, it's that education component. And in this rush to adopt AI into every single facet of our lives, we haven't given ourselves time to educate ourselves around what it is and how to properly use it. It's just been in a lot of ways thrown at us. And I think maybe the part that we can blame sort of the companies for is throwing it at us without asking, certainly. But this is what we have. This is where we are. So it is around, I love that personal responsibility of how you're going to then take this and use this tool and improve your own life as well as hopefully society and the environment.
And I think unlike a lot of big transitions and transformations that we've been through as humanity, this did come up really, like AI has been around since the 50s. It's been used to serve us or manipulate us, depending on which lens you look at, in marketing and all the big social platforms and shopping platforms. But it did come up very quickly. it was literally an overnight. ChatGPT changed everything. And it's only been 3 years
Yeah,
this month. But when you look at what's happened in that 3 years, that it's just breakneck speed. It's breathtaking. I did a post just today with a list of things that have dropped in the last 48 hours. I mean, I can't keep up. I don't know how anyone else does, and I live and breathe this stuff. So it's just happening at such a pace that we haven't experienced before. And I think, we're coming out of, just to go a bit deep, we're coming out of the fatigue of COVID. I think, COVID left a lingering fatigue in
absolutely.
general. And I think the pace of AI has just been a bit jarring for a lot of people as well. So it is no wonder that people are grappling with, how do I use this properly? And then just using it lazily until they figure that out. So
Well, because it's fun, right? If you can create something, a fun little, video that you put on TikTok and you get a million views and make a little bit of money out of, I mean, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you do that? But at the same
absolutely.
time, for those of us looking at it critically, like the two of us, we're thinking, well, okay, well, what is that actually doing? Like, why did we need that? We didn't need that. But this idea has been around with every new iteration of whether it's technology or television or the newspaper, right? There was always, somebody screaming it was going to be the end of humanity, and why are we doing this sort of stuff? But you're spot on that the speed at which this happened is just mind-boggling. So I suppose the question then becomes, how do we rein that back a bit and not slow things down? Because the 4 or 5 men that are creating this stuff are not going to slow down until the bubble pops. But how do we then take that personal responsibility? I think of everything out of our conversation, I'm going to be taking that personal responsibility thing with me for sure.
Oh, good. Well, I think and there's personal responsibility for how we use it ourselves, but I think we also all have a responsibility to support other people through this journey too. Because the reality is, it's going to be a bumpy ride.
Oh, yeah.
It is not going to be a smooth transition. There will be major backlash in some areas. There will be job changes. There will be, changes to every aspect of how we live our lives. And I think the more that we can take personal responsibility and then look out for the people around us, the better we'll fare through this. That's my little utopian view on.
It's the right one. So at least you have one person who'll go live on your kibbutz.
Oh, fabulous. So, John, as we start to wrap up, I always like to ask, if you are standing on the hill looking out to the future and we get this right, what does the future look like with AI, particularly, I guess, through an environmental or sustainability lens? What's possible?
Yeah, so if I take a hyper optimistic view of it, which in this case I will, because it's a thought experiment, I've always said that if I had a crystal ball and I can look, 15, 20 years into the future, maybe 15 years into the future, I have always told people that when you go to the store, when you go shopping, everything that you purchase will be a sustainable purchase. Because the way things are going now, companies have to perform on sustainability. So we bring that out a decade, 15 years, the companies that aren't doing it today aren't going to be around anymore. So it'll just be this virtuous cycle that gets to basically everything being done behind the scenes. All I have to do as a consumer is just make a choice. Love that. I really think that's a realistic vision of where the future is. Where AI fits into that, if we use it hyper optimistically, is getting us there faster and getting us there in a way that is, again, going to take everybody along on the journey. So that's my hope with AI and sustainability. Hopefully we get there, especially with the speed at which things are going, but time will tell. Maybe that's the title of this episode, Time Will Tell.
Time will tell. Yes, done. Thanks for naming the podcast title. One of the things I think about too, because I'm very interested in the hyper-personalization potential of AI. So I've been teaching hyper-personalization in marketing for 16 years. How do we have people feel like you're speaking directly to them rather than to the masses? And one of the promises of AI is hyper-personalized shopping experiences, or that as a consumer, what we get is exactly what we need. Now, I may be naive around this, but rather than buying 20 different things from Temu that arrive in a different color, a different shape, a different size,
Don't get me
and
started.
throwing that rubbish in the bin, I do hope that we have a future where that hyper-personalization actually means the less use of resources.
Absolutely. So my bugbear when it comes to sustainability has always been the communications around it. And I could talk about this for hours, but we've been really bad at it for many, many years. And just very recently have we realized, our communications suck. We need to fix it. And so now what we are looking at doing, and what we've always known we needed to do, is hyper personalizing the rationale of sustainability. It's no longer informing people that something's going on. If you don't know something's happening, if you're not aware, that's on you. Your head's in the sand. It's okay, what do I do? How do I action things? What in my personal life can I do to make the planet a better place? So that hyper personalization is so fascinating that you bring up, especially when it comes to AI, and how that can then speed along that transition I was talking about to a more sustainable future. Because if that's where we are now with communications, trying to embed that thinking, but also those ways of working, that's going to take a minute. But if we can find a way, and maybe this is a job opportunity, I don't know, if we can find a way to really take AI and blend it into the comm space around sustainability to result in that hyper personalization faster, that's just going to speed along the sustainable transition much more than it would have otherwise.
Excellent. Well, that's a lovely place to wrap. We almost landed and then took off again.
We did, what do they call it? A turnaround.
A turnaround, yes. Thank you so much, John, for your time today. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and it's one that comes up so often in my work. And I feel quite inept a lot of the time because I don't have answers to a lot of the questions that people are asking. So I've really valued the opportunity to throw some of those at you. If people want to find out more about your work and connect with you, how do they find you?
Sure. So they can check out my website, johnpabon.com. I'm sure it'll be in the show notes. I'm an accidental influencer on TikTok. I don't do dancing, but if you want to follow me there, I do go quite in depth on subjects around sustainability, geopolitics, and my life living in Australia. So feel free to follow me at John A. Pabon as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, John.
No, thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the AI Grapple. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and colleagues and subscribe on your favourite podcast platform. We would love to hear your thoughts, so reach out with any questions or comments about the show. Until next time, keep grappling with AI and stay curious.